From the Hype HQ studio in Chicago, Illinois, it's Startup Hype Man, the podcast. Hello, everyone. My name is Raj Nation, and I am the founder of Startup Hype Man. Fast-growing startups work with me because they want to become better storytellers. Whether that's for customers, investors, or a packed audience, they know that story is their ticket to stand out, stand apart, and change the game. And this podcast here is where I talk with entrepreneurs and leaders in the startup ecosystem, ranging from scale stage to early stage, as they share specific strategies that they have executed to stand out across three specific areas: sales, marketing, and people. Before we begin today's episode, remember you can head to startuphypeman.com and subscribe to the newsletter that doesn't suck. You'll get new podcast episodes and timely reads written by me, but also helpful articles from around the web and a notice of upcoming pitch competitions. All right, let's dive in and hear how today's guest is changing the game. Ladies and gentlemen, making her way to the microphone, hailing from both South Carolina and Michigan, and currently residing in Columbia, South Carolina, and Chicago, Illinois, splitting time, but soon to be moving to Charleston, South Carolina. She is the founder and CEO of Improve It. Please welcome the real deal, Erin Deal. Okay, so final countdown is your like walk-in music?
Yes, that's it. Oh, thanks for having me, Raj.
Of course. She is Erin Deal, founder and CEO of Improve It. Improve It works with everyone from startups to Fortune 100 companies, bringing the power of improv to the workplace through in-person workshops when there's not a pandemic, online trainings, and most recently they've launched a workshop from home online membership, including online trainings, courses, and modules, all to help business professionals use the power of improv to break through communication barriers, work past unconscious bias, become stronger communicators as a team, and overall improve the company. Now, Improve It has worked with some heavy hitters in the game, let me tell you, from Mesirow Financial to Kellogg's to United, PepsiCo, Groupon, Motorola, and more. They're also a graduate of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, and they've been going at this for 6 years strong as of this recording. I'm super excited to be talking with Erin Deal today, and Erin is a backstory, is someone who I can't even remember how we were introduced. I think it was through Alita Miranda Wolf, I think.
Yes.
Who is a previous guest on this show. And I think when you and I met Erin, we both were like, she's probably the smartest person I've ever talked to.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct.
So Erin and I met a couple of years ago. We immediately hit it off. It's taken, I don't know how it's taken this long to get you on the show, but here you are. And today we are talking about building KPIs around core values. So can you just let us know why this is on your mind and why this is important to you?
Yes. Before I do, can you introduce me every single time to everything I do in life, please? Yes. Okay. That was fantastic. Why don't we just,
I'll record a voice memo and you just play it whenever you walk into a room.
Raj, I'm dead serious. I would keep this on my phone. Yes. Okay. I need this in my life. I feel so pumped to be here. So why are core values important and how do they relate to KPIs? So, as I was going through this Goldman Sachs program, we took a clinic specific to core values. This was 2018. Our business had been around for 3 years already. And the women, I will say women, because we were all women internally who make up our company, and I really understood that we all had one big mission, and that is to improve the lives of professionals everywhere using improvisational comedy as the method to make them their truest and best selves professionally. So for us, we thought, okay, as I was going through Goldman Sachs, it was very important to me to make sure that culture was a big piece, because we preach and talk to people about their company culture all day long. So we have, without even consciously doing it, created a really strong company culture internally and also with our facilitators. So I have full-time staff and I have contractors. And so those facilitators were also hired prior to establishing our core values, but we really wanted to make sure that every hire and every single metric that we made moving forward was related to the core of who we are. So based on a clinic I went through with Goldman Sachs, we developed a training process internally to create these core values. And what we did was first just establish who we are as human beings and write those core values on a big white paper. And then we saw correlations, we saw themes. And from those themes, we developed our own internal set of core values that then we used for every hiring metric moving forward, as well as review periods every quarter for our internal employees, and as well as some of our contractors. So it has been a huge part of growing our organization. It is the core, pun intended, of everything we do.
We're going to dive a whole lot more into that as this conversation unfolds, but let's learn a little bit more about you first, Erin. So you went to Clemson University for undergrad, and you were you studied broadcast journalism there. You also were part of the Clemson University radio station. I actually have a radio background from college myself as well. I would broadcast. I hosted a weekly sports talk show in college and broadcasted some of our basketball games, softball games, volleyball games, soccer games, etc., which was a ton of fun. So you've clearly had this like using your voice kind of in you for a long time, not just in the improv realm. What were you thinking with the broadcast journalism degree? Like while you were in college, what were you thinking the next 20 years of your life were going to be like?
Yeah, first of all, I can tell you've done radio because you got the charisma and the like voiceover skills. Again, I want my voiceover so I can play it every morning.
And the face for radio too.
And I like to say that too. But truly, it was an internship while I was in school, and it was for a radio station in Detroit. And I can still recite to you, I did the traffic when the traffic girl wasn't there. I was just so excited to have that moment on air when she wasn't around. But behind the scenes, I was helping production. I was helping pull just fun things that they could talk about on the air. I was getting my kind of wheels greased, I will say, for I think what has prepared me for this. But the whole purpose, Raj, was I was supposed to be Oprah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that was since I was 13. I had a maiden name. My name was Erin Holbrook. So it's more of a mouthful than Erin Deal. Erin Deal is actually a true blessing. It's just, and there's a lot of puns you can make. But the Erin Holbrook show was supposed to be a thing. And my parents, God bless them, were like, if anybody can do it, it's you, because you'll bug the crap out of somebody until you get it. So they never told me I couldn't do it. So I went to school for broadcast journalism, knowing that this was sort of the plan. Couple that with, I've always performed. So I grew up on stage. My mom is in theater. She's still in theater to this day. I danced and sang and acted my entire life. And then even in high school, like I've always just I love comedy. I was voted class clown, like out of my high school. So it was always in the back of my mind that a career in talk. Here's the thing. I wanted to be a talk show host. I had no platform or anything to talk about. I just knew I loved people and I wanted to make an impact and a difference in some way, shape, or form. So I thought, let's get a journalism degree. Turns out, when you have a communications degree, you don't have a set career path. Mm-hmm. So I've just always gone into things like, let's try this. You mean you
didn't get offered a TV show like on graduation day?
Oh my God, Raj, it was shocking to me. As many people were shocked as well. But it was just one of many lessons in failure that I've learned along the way. But the goal was to become a talk show host. And I think I've got it now. I think I have my own talk show in some way, shape, or form. But it took me a really long time to figure out how to get here. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, let's assume, let's play a little, what's the game? Dreaming? I don't know if that's the name of the game, but Dream Big by Startup Hype Man. let's say the Aaron Holberg show is happening today in the original vision that you had when you were 13 years old. So like your version of Oprah. Who is your dream interview?
Oh my God, this is the best question ever. Who is my, well, I'm going to just turn it on the gal, Oprah. I mean, whose dream interview isn't Oprah? I don't, that seems cliche. It would either be her, or here's another shocker, Ellen DeGeneres. I love both of them. I channel Ellen in my workshops. She literally, I take my arms and I open myself up and I'm like, let the light shine in, and Ellen DeGeneres. And then I just feel that forward because I just think she's a great sort of symbol of inclusivity, of positivity, of fun, of character. And also with Oprah, I mean, she has just done so much for so many people. And the commonality for both of them is that yes, they have the platform. Yes, they are the vessel, but everything they do is for the greater good of others, which is my primary goal now. I think when I was 13, my goal was purely selfish. If I'm looking back and being honest, it was, I want to talk on TV. I want to be famous. I don't want to be famous. I want to help people, and I want to help them in a way that impacts their lives every single day. And I think, you know, when you're 13, you don't realize those things. I just knew I loved, I guess I did want to make a difference. I did know that, but I didn't know how. And I think that improv has given me that how.
Sure. The Ellen one's interesting only because she's been under a lot of fire recently. So I'm just curious with the like allegations that have come up with the Ellen show, like how has that kind of changed? Oh, you're not familiar?
Am I living under a rock?
Oh man, maybe you are. There have been, there's been a lot of talk, and there's an investigation underway about a toxic workplace environment on the Ellen show that has happened under her eye. I don't know. I haven't looked into it, to be honest. I don't know if it's her having poor employment practices specifically, and like, for lack of a better phrase, like her being an a-hole, or if it was like the overall workplace environment. She actually did just release a letter on Twitter, I think it was, saying how like she accepts responsibility. It's her show. She should know what's going on, that kind of thing. But there have been, I do recall there have been some people who have spoken out that like about Ellen specifically. I think most people are speaking out about what it's like, what it has been like working on the show. So I may have just burst an Ellen bubble within you, but it is happening in the news cycle right now. And I haven't looked into it enough to be able to speak in a more educated manner than what I just gave you. And even then, it's probably a little bit skewed.
No, what you did is educate, because you educated somebody who is not educating herself right now. I've actually taken a break from news.
Which is probably okay.
Yes. So I've taken a 2-week cleanse specifically. So if this has happened in the past 2 weeks, I used to read every single morning, and I started my day with doom and gloom, and I have decided to focus on my projects. So I literally have not paid attention, and I'm now going to do a deep dive and educate myself, because I don't want to be associated and think about that type of work environment. I think, you know, what's interesting, I've heard rumors of that, but nothing was ever confirmed, and I wanted to believe it wasn't true. So Raj, that will be my Google tonight with a glass of Sauvignon.
Yeah. Well, you still don't have to start your day with that kind of news. You can insert at 3 p.m.
You're right. I'll do it during a lunch break. I'll get a boring salad and cry over the boring salad about Ellen. My dreams have now been dispersed. Anyhow.
That's what we do on the show. We disperse dreams.
Well, we were dreaming and then we dispersed them.
Yes,
so now,
but
this is interesting. I did not know that, and I will very much look into that.
The fame piece you touched on is interesting. You said like when you were younger, you just wanted to be famous, and I think a lot of us have some degree of that. I probably didn't outwardly say it, but that was probably definitely a motivating factor when I was younger. And I think what I've learned is that fame is very relative to the communities and audiences you're around. Yeah. For example, like there is a very small percent, probably you can count on 2 hands or 2 hands and 2 feet, the number of people in the world who are actually known by everyone in the world.
Yeah.
It would be like Michael Jordan and like Oprah would probably be like the
Yeah.
two on that list. Where you could go to like the most random pocket in the world and they would know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
And maybe even have like apparel of either of those people. But aside from that, it's really like, for example, there are people, myself included, who like have some degree of influence on LinkedIn, and we have our followers, but we're not. To me, though, the humbling thing is always like, there are people on LinkedIn who like follow me for my content, and sometimes people will be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm actually connected with you," or "I can't believe I'm actually talking to you. I happen to meet them in person," because they've been viewing my stuff online for a while, and I'm like, "Oh, it's weird." But at the same time, the humbling part is like, there's that, and then there's like some of my like groups of friends like don't really totally even know what I do for a living.
Hype man.
Right. And so I think that's like that's the interesting like disparity, and it's also humbling because you realize you're never as important as you think you are. But it's like, there's a pocket where I have some degree of fame, just as I think you have a certain pocket where you've created fame, but it doesn't mean that like the world knows who we are, and that's also okay.
Yeah, I think it's twofold on that too. I think the fame that when I was in high school, I was 13 years old, I guess that's freshman year, but I think back to, I grew up in the late like I was an 80s baby, but I was in high school in the late 90s, I graduated in 2001. Mm-hmm. And at that time, there was just this culture of young famous people. There's still a lot of young famous people today, but for whatever reason, there wasn't social media. The internet was still like the
Mm-hmm.
It was very different. And
young famous people at that time was like Dawson's Creek cast.
Oh my God, my favorite show.
What was her name? Jessica.
Joey Potter.
No, but like the actress's name, Jennifer Love Hewitt.
Well, no, she's not on Dawson's. She was on What I Did. That's what I love. I know what you did last summer. Yeah, yes. But Dawson's was Katie Holmes, James Van Der Beek, Joshua Jackson, who I was obsessed with. Anyway, but all those things, I think fame was coming from a selfish place of, I want this. I want people to know me. I want people. I think I did things that were self-serving, and the motive was always internal, which I feel like now the motive is you. The motive is the audience. The motive is, I'm doing this because it will brighten somebody's day. I'm doing this because it will make somebody feel better. I'm doing this because this is a really dark period right now. How can I shed light? I'm doing this workshop so somebody here can feel less alone and feel like they can come out of their shell and be the best version of themselves. I'm doing this coaching session because I want this person to feel confident when they speak in a room. So that shift for me has completely changed everything. And I think that I don't need the accolades. I want the impact now. Mm-hmm. And I chase the feeling of people specifically wanting change in their lives and seeing that change happen. And does that make sense? And I mean that really wholeheartedly. Like, I'm not saying this cliché-ly. I do think, cliché-ly, is that a word? I do think that it is true I always wanted to help people, but I just was so young and immature, I didn't know what that really meant. And now I feel everything happened in a time in my life where I'm older, I've had more experience, that I can now see what that means to me now.
Yeah, and it is a maturity point. It's something that I've gone through as well. I remember, this is probably 5 years ago now, with my first business, I was featured in Huffington Post, and I was like, oh my God, I've made it. And then but people don't customers don't come calling just because your name is in Huffington Post. And you're like, oh wait, I didn't really mean anything.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's just, it's exposure, right? But I think it's just, I don't know. It's very interesting to think back on those times versus now, because I still am the same person, but we all grow as we get older. We just have more experiences in life, but it's what we do with those experiences and learn from them that I think makes the difference.
As I think I have said on this show before, and if I haven't, then I'm saying it now, I feel like for me personally, my 20s was spent building up my ego, and now my 30s is spent just tearing it down.
Yeah. And it's, well, and people, I think in general, are sick of perfection, and they're sick of, they want real. They want the authenticity. They don't, they want to know that people are human beings. They make mistakes, and then they get back up from those mistakes. And that's how they've created the successful story that they now have. I think that's, and we were in this culture for a while that was perfection and this Instagram reel of highlights. And that's just, it creates thoughts in our mind that we're not good enough. And I think that now people celebrate the realness versus perfection.
Right. Well, I think that's a good transition into core values, which is the main point of discussion, your core value, building core or KPIs around core values. First, just take us through, I gave a very super high level overview of Improve It, but why don't you just give a little bit better, almost elevator pitch, if you will, of Improve It and what you guys do?
Yeah. So you're so spot on when you said in your intro that we used to be in person. I mean, we were only in person, but we use improvisational comedy to train professionals on soft skills. So things like team building, leadership, presentation skills, networking. And we do that in a setting that allows people to feel safe, supported. And we now are virtual. So everything we did in person, we moved. Thanks to the lovely platform that we are on right now, Zoom. We have a business still, and it's surviving and thriving in this pandemic. So we offer keynotes online. We offer our workshops online. And we, like you mentioned, the membership model. We have a membership going called WFH, Workshop from Home. And we just launched something today called Laugh Break, which is very exciting. So we are made up, I should say, of improv professionals who have strong backgrounds, not only professionally, but in improvisation. And they help facilitate all of our trainings. And they're also hilarious human beings and can improvise with the best of them. They're all on all of the major stages. When the world is open, they're all on those major stages. And we've created a platform for them to be on stage virtually today. So with Laugh Break, and I can tell you more about that too, but it's exciting.
That's really cool. So as we come into this main topic of KPI, building your KPIs around core values, you mentioned earlier on that there was a module within the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program around core values. Was that when you said, hey, let's actually build KPIs around this? Or was it just kind of okay, this is interesting to me. I'm going to write something down. I'm just going to table it for now, and I'll come back to it later.
So great question. Actually, in the course, they just taught us how to create our core values. They did not really give us any metrics or KPIs to use to essentially utilize them. I had a friend in the program who was also, the cohort in Goldman Sachs is all business owners. It's a very hard program to get into. You have to apply, basically give your firstborn and your blood type, and then you get in, and it's a rigorous process, but you're with a cohort of business owners. So one of the women in my cohort was, she's got 4 million revenue. She owns a dog supply store that is now becoming a franchise. And she gave me the idea to measure all things against our core values. And she provided me with a resource of hers that she used for interviewing. And so we used that template for interviewing. We created our own reviewing metrics based on those core values. And it's very simple. But the interesting thing is what I found, we have one hire internally who and we're a small team, so that makes a huge difference, who we hired specific to core values. So every interview question was tied to a core value in some way, shape, or form. And we came up with those because we wanted to make sure that the person that we hired, what we do is we sell trust and we sell collaboration. So if that person is not a trustworthy person or a collaborative person to their core, then they're not going to be able to sell our service. So every review that I do with her, she's every core value, she gets the 5 out of 5 compared to the core value because she was hired for her core values. And I should say there's actually there's a couple metrics in there that can variable because they're based on metrics. Like one of them is drive results. So if the results aren't there, you can score lower. But it's interesting because I said to her before, I was like, you're never probably not going to score high on these. And anyone in our company now is not going to score high. It's just we keep the measurements small. So we measure every quarter. Things can shift and change just based on what's going on at work, what's going on in the world, what's going on with you personally. But our goal is to make sure that we hire people, because that is our business, who believe and are these core values, because you can't train that. That is you can, but it will take a lot of time. If you hire based on who they are to the root of their human being, then you can train them on the skills that they need to do their job. It is very hard to do the opposite, which is what we teach, soft skill training. So we need a lot of time to develop somebody into this, vision of yes and. So if one of our core values is yes and, which means you don't judge, you add to what is being said, you celebrate everyone's idea. You can train somebody to do yes and, but if somebody is selling yes and, you better believe that they've got to believe it to the core of who they are. So does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
They can't be putting on concept.
They can't be putting on a smile to start talking about yes and. It has to actually be from within.
Yes.
What are the other core? You mentioned yes and, you mentioned drives results. What are the full suite of core values?
Yep. So there's 5. So yes and, explore more, drive results. I'm like play and have fun, and everyday leadership. So I can elaborate on those too. But
well, I'm curious then, how do you take that and then build an interview process around that? Because I say this because there are a lot of companies who do want to see the person exhibiting elements of core values within the interview process, but they don't necessarily track against it. And typically they're looking more for are they able to do the 7 bullet points of the job function, which I know that's also important. But so how are you able to take those 5 core values you just mentioned and actually build the interview process around that?
Totally. So great cue. This is where my friend in Goldman Sachs stepped in, and she provided me with a template that she uses. It's a scorecard. And essentially we take the core values, we assign a numeric value to where they fall on that scale based on a series of questions. So for yes and, we will ask a series of questions that help us understand, are they living this way? And then based on those answers, we then rate them on a 1 to 5 scale. And everybody in the company interviews anybody who's coming on. So it's not just one person's answer. We then take everybody's score and we average them. And then we look at who has the highest score. And generally that's the person that we want to hire. And we do that as well with our facilitators who are contract. So that's how we internally hire, is based on a series of questions that relate to each core value. And then we measure their, out of those 5 elements, a 1 through 5 scale, what's their number average with everyone in the organization who they've talked to. And then we generally look at, that's one assessment. We also have them take an assessment prior to even interviewing. So that's the first step, is they take an assessment. Are they a good fit for this role? Based on this assessment that a vendor we used is actually helping us resource and see, could they do sales? Are they good at administrative tasks if we're hiring for an administrative role? Then if they are score high on that, and it doesn't necessarily mean they have to, if they don't score high enough on that to be good fit for what that assessment says, we'll probably still interview them if we see potential on the resume. And then we take the score from the core values and we take those two and kind of combine them side by side to see, will this match up? And we've found success in this process. So it's using data, but also using a lot of behavioral type questions to get the results that we're looking for. And then this is internal hires. Contract hires, we're using more of just the core value scale because our contractors are facilitators and they are the face of our company. So they have to embody these things to the core. And we always say the traits of a good improviser are the traits of a good human. So, I mean, on stage, you have to be able to yes and in order to be successful. You have to be able to explore and heighten scenes. You have to be able to drive results, which is ultimately play with everybody on your team to make it everybody is on stage as an ensemble. You have to be able to be a leader and be a leader that you want to be, and then play, learn, and have fun is a given in improv. So all of these traits that we have in our core values are also the traits of a great improviser. So the ability to see that in an interview process, and our facilitators are a bit different because not only do they have score on the core values side, the interview side, they also have to audition. So, and we have to make sure that they're a solid performer. So what we do is we find haystacks and we just look through them for the needle and then we pull them out. And those are the people who are facilitators for us. And they're the best people. We call ourselves the Improve It family. I mean, they have got each other's backs and they know each other because the improv community is small. We've got facilitators in Chicago and Charlotte. And now because we're virtual, those two teams, people know each other. So that's been a blessing of this pandemic, is that before they were almost just two separate worlds that didn't exist together. And now we're one big Improve It family that shares Zooms and happy hours.
So I want to focus a little bit on drives results as one of your core values and how that plays out, because I think oftentimes when we think of core values, we just think of that as like an internal thing and how do we connect with each other as colleagues and coworkers. But part of this is how the company is able to grow because of these values, from not just are we, being more of a family internally, but are our sales growing? Is our revenue growing? Are we expanding as a company? So can you touch on, and maybe it's more than just the drives results, but can you touch on how this impacts the external facing brand and the overall growth of the company?
Yeah. So, Raj, this is, just to start off with growth, we had substantial year-over-year growth since 2016. So it was 40%, 30%, 25%, and this year we were on par to do another 20% year-over-year growth. Now, if you had a crystal ball and told me that while I put together this beautiful 5-year growth plan at Goldman Sachs that there was going to be a global pandemic and people couldn't leave their house, I might have planned differently. So we are, the word of the year is break even. And so we are, truly our world got turned upside down in this global pandemic. And when we say drive results, what that means is we all internally, I'll speak internally and then I'll speak what that looks like externally. So internally, we have metrics that we are all responsible for. Every single person knows exactly the amount of revenue that they're responsible for generating. Every single person is met. That's the drive results piece. We measure that weekly. We measure that monthly. We measure it quarterly. So we have a weekly meeting. We have a monthly meeting. And then the review period is when we talk about it quarterly. So, and we're small. So we can tell very quickly what's happening in our organization. How that looks and how that is shown externally is just by the customer service that we provide. So because we know, here are our metrics, here's what we need to do to drive revenue, our team is on it. I mean, we're a very high touch business. I mentioned this before, but in order for us to get your company, to stop productivity, to get all 30, let's say it's 35 people in your organization, all 35 people in a room for 2 hours to allow us that time, people have to trust us. I say it's like buying a wedding dress. Like, people need to feel good when they have a conversation with us. They need to walk away knowing that they are in the good hands and their company is in good hands, because they're the client who books us. They're the one who's going to get the pushback if it doesn't go well. So what that looks like is giving the best service to our clients as possible in order to drive those results. And when we say drive results for our facilitators, they're a bit different, because internally we're trying to bring in revenue, and our facilitators are the ones that are doing the actual service. So we measure metrics. At the end of every workshop, there is a survey. We provide an infographic to the client, and we provide feedback to our facilitators after everything, in person or virtual, so they know if they're measuring up to the success of the client and the ROO, the return on the client's objective. So from a very, we believe that data tells a story, and we are improvisers, but we're also some of the most planned people in the world. My internal team, we are type A, and we're not mad about it. And that's what you have to do in order to see that growth. So from every level in the organization, internally, facilitators, we are driving those results in either bringing it in and then pushing out the service. We are measuring it every single step of the way, because we wouldn't be called Improve It if we didn't want to improve. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great question. I hope it answered the question, but that core value is what generates growth in our business. That core value is growth.
I want to ask a couple more questions before we begin our wrap up. But before I do that, I just want to pause and give a shout out to our partner of the show, Sales Hacker, which if you've been listening for a while, then you're probably familiar with Sales Hacker, but they are the world's smartest and largest community for forward-thinking B2B professionals. It's 135,000 members deep, which means whether you're a CEO like Aaron, whether you're a head of sales or a sales rep or anywhere in between, or even a marketer, Sales Hacker helps you get better at your job, plain and simple, with podcasts, articles, webinars, and research from actual sales experts and practitioners, including moi. Sometimes I'm a contributor on the platform. It's a really smart group of people, and I love what they're doing over there, especially over the past couple months. They've launched a whole brand new website, which is now very community-driven. So instead of passive content absorption, you can actually get involved through discussion boards. They're hosting weekly Ask Me Anythings on different sales topics. For example, things like, how do I break the ice with someone on LinkedIn? Or what are some good subject lines for cold emails? These are all discussions that you can not only read, but become a part of yourself. How do you become part of those conversations and become part of the community? Well, you can join Sales Hacker for free at www.saleshacker.com. All you gotta do is enter your email address and you're in. Again, it's saleshacker.com to get the access to the articles, the research, the webinars, the podcasts, the Ask Me Anythings, and more. www.saleshacker.com. Our show is also brought to you by the Blissful Prospecting Think Outside the Script Summer Tour. My friend Jason Bay, who is the first guest of this season of the show, he is hosting this summer-long virtual tour to help you get better at prospecting. There are live interactive virtual sessions every week all the way through early October with experts and practitioners and actual account executives and SDRs who are sharing the strategies, the formulas, the weapons in their toolkit, or the tools in their toolkit, I should say, all to help you get better at your outreach. So if you want to know how to send better cold emails, if you want to know how to make better cold calls, if you want to learn about how to get the confidence to make a cold call, if you want to talk about psychology of your buyers, all of these things are available in the Think Outside the Script Summer Tour. There are 2 to 3 live interactive sessions happening per week, so none of it is pre-recorded. It is all happening, and I can tell you, I did my session recently. It was amazing, and there have been so many that I have tuned into myself. And even though you get the recording, I have to say it is so much better if you are there live when you can interact with the chat box and all that stuff. To become part of the tour, where you can sign up for as many talks as you would like, all for free, you just go to tour.blissfulprospecting.com. Again, tour.blissfulprospecting.com, and you can sign up for as many talks as you like, all for free. The tour continues through early October. Today on the show, we've got Aaron Diehl, the founder and CEO of Improve It, and we're talking about building your KPIs around your core values. So, Aaron, a couple more questions here before we close up shop. You mentioned you've had some really good growth over the last few years. Now, if you endure another crazy expansive growth period, would that mean you have to add values on or change your values? Or do you think KPIs change within the existing core values, or does neither of it change?
That's a great question. I truly believe that these 5 core values are who we are, to the core of Improve It, and I don't think they change. I think that either we change with it, if that makes sense. And for us, these 5 things are truly what we stand for on an external level, Our service offerings are these 5 things. So unless we went back and changed everything that we provide to our clients, then these 5 things will exist as long as we are serving clients in the way we are right now. I will say that I am just so pleased with the core values that we've come up with and how it's helped our growth. And obviously in 2020, it's a different year. But what we were projected to do and what we were planned on doing was based on this growth. And we were actually expanding to Atlanta this year. That was another part of our growth plan that we created with Goldman Sachs. And we were bringing on more co-facilitators. This core value principle and measuring against this core value principle while interviewing and looking for talent was going to be the forefront of everything we do. I'm saying even interns who work with us go through this interview process. So it is really embodied us as an organization. And I think because of that, it helps people because the people that are helping them embody these 5 traits.
So you brought up the 2020 aspect, and I think I did want to actually ask about that in the sense that I think it's a lot easier to point to core values when things are going really well, when times are good. And I think a lot of organizations are able to do that. I also think I have actually seen and actually experienced in a past life what happens when things aren't going so well. And obviously we're in a pandemic right now, which is a little different, but like I've been with a company where sales were down and all of a sudden it felt like those values, which were posters on the wall around the office, did not exist as anything more than posters on the wall around the office.
Yeah.
And we got so like, well, we got to increase revenue. That's the goal. That's the only focus. And all those other things seem to just sort of like fall off by the wayside. So what's your advice or recommendation for living it? Because I would say it's more important during the down times, arguably.
Yeah.
So what is your advice for making sure that you still live these values even when things aren't going well?
I mean, so I hear you on that. I actually, and I don't like to speak negatively of any company I've ever worked for, but I've worked for a company where there were core values and they were just like a joke, right? Like they were just something we were like, oh, that's a core, you're not doing this, you're not doing the thing. And we laughed about it. And I think when you involve your company and the employees in the creation of the core values, that's what actually makes them stick, because they've had it's yes and it's to a T. It's yes anding each other to help create something as a group versus one person dictating what they are. So if you can reevaluate your core values, let's say you have a great year, you have to hire new people. reevaluate those core values year over year and make sure they're still aligned with who you are as an organization. I mentioned these 5 will be with us because I think right now I'm so pleased with the team that we have. And we're kind of at a stagnant growth period, so we're not bringing on new talent. But let's say I had to hire 200 new people. I would bring on those people into a room and do a collective brainstorm to make sure that they are a part of the core value process. Because when you feel a part of the team and you feel like you've contributed to creating what the company stands for, then when you're measured against it, it's not somebody else's metric, it's your own metric. And so that is a huge difference, I think, in the creation of core values versus it being a poster on the wall. I will say in times of chaos like we're in, one of the core values, yes, and is how I like to lead. And it is something that I feel like I always have done, but it is, again, it means don't judge, allow people to share ideas, don't necessarily negate, just add to what they're saying, make them feel heard. And it's almost like a thank you for contributing an idea. When this pandemic hit, my go-to leadership style is yes and. And there's a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Yeah. And it talks about 2 types of leaders. There's a peacetime leader and there's a wartime leader. And when things get crazy, if you're in a war zone, you don't want a person asking you, how do you think we should go to battle? What is your idea? You want them to say, you go here, you go here, you go here. And so I went to my natural leadership style of yes and in the beginning. I was like, what do you think we should do? Should we have online offerings? Should we, and my team was so scared, and they were feeling the fear that I was feeling about, because we're an in-person business now faced with, do we even have a business? It took me a couple days, and then I realized they don't need me to yes and them. They need me to say, here's where we're going. And sometimes I think when we're faced with challenges like we're in 2020, you have to say, these are our core values. This is who I am on the day-to-day basis. But right now I need to step into this other leadership role, and I need to delegate, and I need to say, this is where we're going. Follow me, get on the bus, because the bus is moving. And that change and that shift in that time period, actually looking back on it, did embody yes and, because my team needed me to yes and a pivot. My team needed me to step in and yes and our own selves, but they didn't necessarily need to be a part of that process. They needed a leader who was going to guide them and get them through it. So there can be shifts in your core values, is what I want to say, based on chaotic situations. And then also just really making sure that the people who are a part of your organization feel tied to those core values because they've had a part in creating them, will make it be more than a poster on a wall. It will make them breathe it, live it every single day.
And to clarify, when you say there can be shifts in core values, do you mean a shift on what they are, or a shift on which value gets emphasized?
I think it's a shift on what value gets emphasized, okay, and in which way. Because yes, and if I'm looking at it, if I was sitting here in March when everything went down, did I embody yes and? Yes, I did. Was that the thing that was needed for the team at the time? The answer is a yes and to the yes and. Yes, it was needed, but I needed to do it in a different way than I'd done it before. So it could be tweaked, and it could, depending on the situation. But I still, at the root of who I was, involved them in the process by saying, here's how we're going to move forward. We're not going to sit here and brainstorm. I'm going to tell us this time. And then through tweaking it, we can brainstorm collectively. It's a little convoluted, but it's just the difference in when things are going well. So the past 4 years, we've seen year over year growth. Things were going well.
I don't know if it's convoluted. I think it's acknowledging that you cannot run a company the same way every day as if nothing else is happening.
That's it. Rod.
Let's hit our wrap up. Where can our listeners find you and learn more about Improve It?
Yes. So you can check out our website, that's toimproveit.com. I also have a podcast called the Failed It Podcast. So we believe there are no mistakes as an improver or an improviser. There are no mistakes, only gifts. So we look at your failures as gifts. So we interview people who are very successful stories, and we honor those gifts along their way. I also provide some tangible tips on gifting, AKA failing, because we believe it's a big part of the process. And there's also my own personal Instagram at Keeping It Real Deal, DIEHL. And our Improve It Instagram is at Learn2TO Improve It. So would love to have any of your listeners check us out there. As I mentioned, we just launched something called Laugh Break, which is an on-demand service that you can book 48 hours in advance for your Zoom meetings. We provide 15 to 30 minutes of laugh breaks with professional improvisers over your Zoom, and you book it on demand. Within 48 hours, we will show up to your meeting and improve it.
Awesome. As we do our wrap up now, we will each give our top 1 or 2 lessons or takeaways for the listeners based on our discussion today. I'll go first, then I'll toss it to you. So our topic was building KPIs around your core values. To me, I think that the biggest takeaway I got from this discussion was kind of what we talked about towards the end there, which is your core values should not be the thing that like locks you in any way. It should actually enable you to improve and modify with the times as necessary. It doesn't like you shouldn't feel bound by these values. You should feel like you have limitless possibilities because of them. And that comes through being able to recognize in the moment which value requires more emphasis, or how does the way it's manifested adapt based on either internal or external happenings. Erin, top 1 or 2 lessons or takeaways for the audience, building KPIs around your core values.
Well, I loved your summary, so that was amazing.
Well, I got it from you, so.
Yeah. I would say this. I would say number 1, let people be a part of the process. Allow them to be a part of the core value building. 2 is, as you mentioned, they can shift over time and they can change based on what's happening in the world. But if you believe to the core of who you are that this is who your organization is, it will not only affect the talent that you attract, the talent that you retain, but it will attract and retain the clients and people that you serve.
Awesome. My final question, which is how we end every episode of this show. Fill in the blank, Erin. Entrepreneurship is blank.
Freedom. I did answer this one that you sent me earlier. Freedom. And I will tell you, in entrepreneurship, success is all about, in my opinion, having freedom. And freedom to choose where you work, where you live, what you do, and who you serve. And that's it.
Entrepreneurship is freedom. She is Erin Diehl, founder and CEO of Improve It. Erin, thank you for joining me today on this edition of Startup Hype Man, the podcast.
Thank you, Raj. I want my voiceover.
That wraps up today's conversation. Did you like what you heard? Startup Hype Man, the podcast, is available on every major platform, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and more. So be sure to subscribe on your platform of choice and leave a rating and review. Do you want to be an upcoming guest on the show? Email media@startuphypeman.com with your idea, and my team will review. Our theme song is Change the Game by Jay-Z, all rights owned by Rockefeller and Def Jam Records. And hey, if you want to work together on making your startup story the only one that matters, email me at rajiv@startuphypeman.com. That's RAJIV@startuphypeman.com. Well, that'll do it for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you to today's guests for joining. You have been checking out Startup Hype Man, the podcast. I'll catch you next week. But in the meantime, word up, raise up.